there is also the administrative function, I think working with the chief registrar to also get the buy-in of the directorate heads.
And with the magistracy and the non-judicial staff?
With the magistracy, I'd work with the registrars, and also, of course, with the Cathys, there is the chief Cathy, and there is also the registrar responsible for the tribunals, which are also since 2010 under the judiciary.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now, you've described yourself as a scholar, a thinker, an intellectual, and I think there was a bit of a, whether you could be described as a jurist, but whatever the case, what do you consider in that context to be your strongest attribute?
My strongest attribute as a thinker, and I'm looking at which different courts like the Supreme Court here, which actually draw from academics, because academics tend to be thinkers.
And how would you apply that in your role as Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court?
I would use it in leading my team. I mean, being diligent in bringing out what issues are coming out, and also in terms of, especially with jurisprudence, and with regard to the administrative aspects, I would use it to also get the buy-in of my colleagues, my colleagues and the staff that I work with.
Thank you. You've also discussed judicial independence and accountability. And I think you have acknowledged that there are challenges that face the judiciary in achieving judicial independence. How would you summarize those challenges, and how would you address them?
I think the challenges that the judiciary has in being independent, one is the finances. And I think here the Constitution envisioned a judiciary fund. And it would be good to operationalize that so that the judiciary is able to determine the way in which it utilizes the finances that are allocated to it.
Anything else?
Is that with regard to independence or accountability?
No, independence first.
Independence. I think the other thing is just abiding by the principles in the code. I mean, the impartiality and absence of bias. That, I think, is something that the judiciary could also do.
How do you, for instance, how should the courts relate to the other arms of government?
Okay, judicial independence relates to the decisional independence of the judiciary, whether you're talking about individual judges or you're talking about the courts. But when it comes to relating with the other arms of government, I think there is an element of interdependence, because all of them are working to serve the same Kenyans. So I would say that independence is decisional, but interdependence comes in when you're talking about, for instance, allocation of resources, etc.
And I think you also observed, Professor, that you would engage the attributes of diplomacy, and the other one was negotiation. How would you apply those in resolving some of those challenges in that interdependence relationship?
You know, diplomacy and negotiation require people coming to the space of decision making, being open with each other about the kinds of challenges, for instance, the judiciary is having. So it would be good to have good discussions and engage discussions with the president if it is about the judges, but there are also other executive arms that affect the way in which the judiciary runs, like in terms of allocation of resources. So I would actually go to it with a lot of really minded to find solutions rather than to create barriers.
Thank you. And finally, you've spoken a lot about Wanjiku. Wanjiku rightly or wrongly believes that the judiciary is corrupt. How would you go about dissuading Wanjiku that that is not the case? And if it is indeed the case, how would you correct it?
You know, this whole issue of the judiciary is corrupt. Again, we have been talking about myself as a scholar, so I have not done any research. I wouldn't say the judiciary is corrupt. But having said that, there is perception of corruption. And perception of corruption, in my view, is as bad, if not worse, than corruption itself. Because if you catch corruption, you deal with it. But you know, perception of corruption is an issue that plagued the judiciary before the 2010 Constitution, and it died for some time, but now there is perception of corruption. I think it is important to use the internal mechanisms, like the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsperson, to deal firmly with even these perceptions, because you see, it harms the image of the judiciary. I mean, and I don't think that anybody wants to get into an institution where you get in and the next day people are saying you're corrupt just because of perception. So I think we need to do things from the inside to remove that perception, and that is by working on the mechanisms that we have within the judiciary.
Are you at all familiar with those mechanisms, or any one of them? Why are they not working if they already exist? What would you, as Chief Justice, do to ensure that those mechanisms work and that the perception you've talked about is reduced or eradicated?
You know, you have to use, Attorney General, you have to use carrots and sticks. You have to get the institution to accept. As Chief Justice, I would get the institution to accept that this perception of corruption is not good. Because, you know, the people are hardworking people, and then perceptions are things that hover over the institution. And then I would use the mechanisms that are there. You know, people are not corrupt in, people will not be accepting bribes or engaging in corrupt activities before the glare of cameras. So I would have a process of even whistleblowers who then enable us to get people who are engaged in the vice. And I believe once you get one and you handle them firmly, then you will have removed the rotten egg, if you like, and that could actually lead to a better perception of our judiciary.
Thank you, Professor. Good afternoon. Chair, that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Honorable AG. Professor, I will now request Commissioner Patrick Kishohi to engage you on areas to do with finance and human resource, and any other area that he might want to engage you in. Commissioner Kishohi.
Thank you, Professor. Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon.
Just before I go to the issues of finance and human resource, as a Chief Justice, if you get this position, and you are in a very competitive economic environment, both nationally and also regionally, a lot of investment, investors coming and going. If you get this position of Chief Justice, what would be your law, or what would you do to ensure that we don't lose in terms of our socio-economic investment to other countries? One thing that you do.
Okay. I think expeditious determination of disputes that come into court is one thing, because investors want clarity and they also want certainty. So working towards ensuring that all those mechanisms in the judiciary that put out how long cases should take are adhered to, so that when people talk about ease of doing business, we are not seeing our country more from the bottom. We move up.
Are you talking about a time frame that if you have a case on investment, you know you're an investor and you have other choices, that if I'm going to put my money in this economy, I need to know maybe within 3 months that my case will be resolved?
I think that would be a good way to go, that you give a time frame, because some of the disputes that come before courts, especially commercial disputes, are perishable. That if you don't determine them within the particular time, then even if it's a victory, it will be Pyrrhic.
Okay. I liked one of your statements in the beginning when you said that you are not here merely to make a living. You are here to make a difference or to enrich the world. You get the position as chairperson of the commission. One thing that you first do to ensure that you enrich the commission, going by this philosophy, one thing that you do to make sure that we move away from our comfort zone.
I would actually get the commission resourced to be able to carry out more training.
More training. Very good. Let me go now to the financial matters. You talked about underfunding of the commission. You are the chairperson of the commission. You talked about the judiciary fund. The fund might be established. Having money in that fund is another thing altogether. So what would you do? What kind of measures would you put in place? You are aware about some funds that we have in this country, like the CDF. It's allocated 2.5% of our national revenue. So what would you do to ensure that the judiciary gets a certain percentage directly from the revenue, 3% or 5%?
I think if we even move to 1%, we would have made progress, and that again is an issue of engagement, because like I said, we all live in one country, the cake is one and we are sharing, so it is using persuasion to get more allocation.
Professor, I want us to break down what you are calling engagement.
Yeah.
Break down that engagement to real issues. You are the Chief Justice, you are the chairperson of the commission. You need let's say 1% or 2%, that you are sure that at the end of every financial year, you have 2% of the national revenue. Break down your engagement to see how you get that money.
I think the first thing I would, when you engage the divisions to come up with their budgets before they are submitted, I would actually ask the departments, divisions to actually put out what is it that we are doing, how does it answer to the general problems in the country, because if you just say 2%,
Okay.
then the question is how does that...
But that's now more internal. I want you now to move to the external.
I would actually also, when the envelope is identified for the judiciary, again, I would ask that a part of that money is put in the judiciary fund. And, I'd be open to negotiating that, recurrent expenditure could actually be out there, but can we have something in the judiciary fund so that the judiciary is able to execute its functions?
Very good. You are the chairperson. You are the head of the arm of government. So whom are you engaging?
I am engaging the executive and the legislature.
Let's look at the legislature. It's quite wide, specific, the legislature.
The committee, that there is a JLAC.
JLAC means what?
The law, it is the committee in parliament that deals with law.
What else? In the other committee?
I'd also engage the Public Accounts Committee.
No, Public Accounts Committee comes much after, I suppose, Postmortem Committee.
So I would have to find out who
Let's look at public-private partnership. I've seen that you have a lot in terms of your networking. How would the judiciary benefit from public-private partnership if you get this position as Chief Justice, the chair of the commission?
The judiciary would benefit from. I raise a lot of funds, and I have raised a lot of funds for my institution over the years. Even right now, I'm in the middle of negotiating a grant from the Norwegians. So I would see where that is applicable. Getting money from outside for the judiciary, you have also to be careful that it doesn't interfere with the independence of the judiciary. But beyond money, I also have a very high-value network of institutions. As a global scholar, I have links with centers around the world who, for instance, if it is training that people need, you could talk to them about it. I'll raise one that we used the other day between Strathmore University of Nairobi. We all knew a particular scholar, Deborah Road. Deborah Road was a scholar that worked on legal ethics. And when she died, we held a colloquium in her honor virtually, and we were able to work with the Stanford Center for Legal Ethics.
Okay. Earlier on, you said that if you get this position as the chairperson of the commission, you'll be able to oversee the expenditure. Those were your specific ones. I want to see that relationship between you as the chairperson of the commission and the accounting officer of the judiciary and other departments in terms of expenditure.
I think that because the Chief Justice is the head of the institution, and so the buck stops there. So what is done by the accounting officer is going to affect if it's not done well, it's actually going to affect the Chief Justice's performance. So there needs to be ways of reporting, different ways of reporting. I think there are certain things that as lawyers, and I'm using again my experience as dean, that we are not very good at, and especially the finances. I think it is very important to have in the Office of the Chief Justice, a way so as to be able to help the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, a function to help with the finances, to help with procurement, because those could actually become the Achilles heel.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Public Financial Management Act?
Yes, to some extent.
Okay. Now let's move on to something else, human resource. The Honorable Attorney General did ask you about your engagement within judiciary, and you talked about judges, magistrates. 85% of the staff are non-legal. The researchers, the other accountants, the financial matters. How will you be able to engage them to ensure that they have or they do maximum work in terms of productivity and efficiency as a chairperson of the commission?
I think, again, using the mechanisms that are there in terms of holding them accountable, but using carrots and sticks so that you encourage people to do well. You could actually, and this can apply across the judiciary, you can have a way of showing who are the staff that are performing very well, so that those that are not performing well want to put up their socks, and if they are not performing well, then you could actually also use disciplinary mechanisms.
There has been this clamor that they would like to have somebody to represent them in the commission. I've heard it myself. So in your view as a chairperson of the commission, the Chief Justice, what would be your take on that matter of representation?
I would have two answers. One, I would have the answer from the Constitution being represented, and given that different other groups are represented, then they have they can actually argue for representation. On the other hand, I really don't understand enough about the inner workings of JSC to say that this is the way to go. But my thinking is that some of those officers would be unionizable. If that is the situation, then they have another way of...
Okay.
Huh?
Okay. Well, Professor, I have one more question about communication, both internal and external. Communication strategy. Earlier on, you talked about the issue of the 41 judges, the position we know about it. If you get this position as Chief Justice and chairperson of the commission, what will be a communication strategy to ensure that some of these things are actually arrived or arrested before they go very far in terms of communication?
I think it is working with people. I mean, I wouldn't take a decision as the Chief Justice alone. It is a collaborative way of who are we engaging and informing people the different steps that have been taken, because many times lack of information is what makes people think that nothing is being done.
Okay. The other question is about diversity. This, if you look at Article 232 of the Constitution, public service talks about diversity. You are the chairperson of the commission. How would you address and ensure and realize that the diversity within the commission, but in terms of the officers, in terms of the staff, is realized? What measures did you put in place?
I think it would be good to, when, for instance, you advertise or you are interviewing for positions, that you keep continuously taking stock of where are the people from. And of course, always bearing in mind competence, but ensuring that you have the interest of having as diverse a workforce as possible.
Okay. I also see from your report here that you have done some work for devolution. I think you had a conference, I think in Kirinyaga and also in Meru. Judiciary, Chief Justice, and you have almost 100 almost 200 stations out there in the counties. How would you relate with the county government in terms of making sure that there is access of justice to Kenyans? Maximize on devolution.
I think that it is important for the judiciary to have a framework for collaborating with the counties, because even when we talk about access to justice and you want physical space, you can get that from counties. You can actually, and when you have facilities within counties working together, helps the judiciary run better.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Tu.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Gishohi. Professor, now we are going to have Commissioner Koskei, who will ask you questions related to your global experience and also community service and other issues that he wishes to put to you, Professor. Commissioner Koskei.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor. Mine will be very short. I want us to focus more on your CV. And in paragraph 2, you said you are a tech savvy, meaning to me you are very good in computers, deep in computers. Tech savvy means that you are very good in computers, and that is one of the attributes we are looking for. As you are aware that judiciary is still at the crossroads of being manual and being, techno-savvy, as you have stated. Now tell me, what technological platforms are you familiar with which can be, brought into, introduced into judiciary and used to ensure that access to justice is enhanced? And at the same time, what is the limitation of ICT in courts?
So I will not talk about specific technical, because I am only a lawyer. So I can say that I use technology to do many things. But I think what we need to do is to look at platforms that enable us to digitize, to move from the very low level of that we are scanning and putting the documents up there. So what we have is a place where we are storing material, to move to a place where actually technology permeates all the activities we do. So if it is human resources, to have a very good human resource information management system. If it is procurement, to have a very efficient and electronic procurement management information system, and also to have in the judiciary people being able to get, like, I think it is very antiquated that we still write with our long hands. So we need to digitize that part of taking records. And I think this is, if you look at the way in which data has become important, the judiciary uses a lot of data. So just finding ways of capturing data, storing it, of course also minded of the integrity of that data.
I really want to, you've talked about all other support services systems. I want to understand whether you would know or you can suggest any system that can do the core business of judiciary, that is court processes and all that. Do you have any suggestion? Have you come across any? Have you interrogated any that can be of help to judiciary?
I have not interrogated any, But I think what we would need to do is to get bespoke, we get a custom-made system for the judiciary that links all these functions. And in this country, I don't think you have a shortage of people who can develop such a platform.
You are proposing that we can get a homegrown solution to it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My second question comes still from your CV. I went through your CV and I realized that you've interacted a lot with public service management. You've been the chair of various parastatals. You even be in some instances you have been appointed as a team leader of modernization of Parklands campus. You've been a committee member of restructuring the legal office. You've been also a member of the task force that was restructuring University of Nairobi in 2005. Borrowing from your experience, I imagine that before you came for this interview, you must have slightly studied the situation as it is in judiciary, and you must be having proposals of how areas that you can quickly improve in terms of management, in terms of how things are being done. So borrowing from your experience, what are these experiences that you have that you can quickly come and help judiciary in transforming it, in restructuring specifically, in issues of, I've even seen again, issues of you've been a tender committee member. I want to understand the experiences that you have that can help us, to also improve the delivery of service in judiciary.
I think one of the things that I have thought about is a question you raised earlier about digitization and the importance of moving from manual systems. And this is across board. The other area is, I think, in terms of questions that were being raised about tracking jurisprudence, being able to capture and being able to have analysis that is presented and people can actually be able to know this decision has been made, this is the ratio decidendi. But I think procurement, procurement is the Achilles heel of many institutions. And that again is a place where we need to look at how is it that we can make procurement digitized. Actually, working at the University of Nairobi as the head of department, I have to these things, and I do it online. We used to do it manually, but with COVID, everything is online, and that really hastens things because it has approval from X has been given, you're waiting for approval from Y.
Thank you. And in your CV still, you say that you are somebody who believes in carrying others along, and that your network is your net worth. Can you explain? What do you mean?
I'm actually a mentor coach, and many of the people I work with them with a view to really mentoring them and coaching them. Having taught about 6,000 students, I've taught 6,000 lawyers around the world. I have supervised 300 bachelors, 100 masters, and 14 PhD. These people are people that are my network. It's actually, that network is a lot more valuable than any silver or gold.
Thank you. As a CJ, and I am following from where Commissioner Judiciary left. As a CJ, you are a diplomat number one when it comes to the judiciary and judicial matters in the country. You are also a fundraiser number one when it comes to judiciary in as far as creating or using your existing networks to finance operations, to help in training. What plans do you have in as far as trying to position judiciary in the world in terms of its image, in terms of the network that can eventually, bring in resources that will enhance training for our judicial officers, judicial staff, and also bring in money or support in areas of jurisprudence and also even in facilities that can be used. Could you briefly tell us and even give us examples of institutions that you can easily, talk to, and you can quickly, say in 6 months, 1 year, you can have a discussion, and perhaps we can see some help from them?
To say that I would be able to say in 6 months we can get resources from Institution X would be not telling the truth. But what I think I can do, I have a huge network. I mean, I went to schools around the world, and many people are in judiciaries. And, there are certain institutions, when you attend them, they take you very seriously as an alum. And when you want to link, many judges, for instance, would be from those institutions. So I would get into a space of looking at what is it that we can do. But even the work we did with the South African Judicial Education Institute, bringing together the judiciary training institutes, and they are funded by UNEP. And for UNEP, because they want to promote the environmental rule of law, that is a space that we can look at in terms of greater partnership. That's for environment, but I'm sure there are many other bodies.
Thank you, Prof. My next question is on corruption. One of the commissioners, and I think the AG, say that there is a perception by Wanjiku that judiciary is corrupt. We have also other stakeholders and institutions of government that they are saying that judiciary is the weakest link, while others argue and say judiciary cannot be any link, because when you look at weakest link theory, it says that you have to be in the sequence, so that whatever happens to you depends on whatever the other one happens. So they say judiciary is nowhere. They always come as an arbiter between the accused and the accuser. So why should it be the weakest link? Where is it in the sequence? Can you expound on that, and whether you also believe that judiciary is the weakest link in corruption, or it is not even in the sequence of corruption and only comes in as just a decision maker when it comes to either convicting or not? What is your position when it comes to corruption and the way the perception has been going on in this country?
I think that question touches on the question of judicial independence, and also the point I had made to the Honorable, the Attorney General, the issue of interdependence. So whereas within the decisions you make, the judiciary makes, there is independence and insulation from pushes by people from the outside, when you talk about accountability and why should Kenyans invest in a judiciary, I think that is when the issue of interdependence comes in. Because if corruption is so rampant in this country and the judiciary is able to handle it and is not handling it because they say we have to, there are handicaps, we should try and deal with those handicaps so that it is also effective in dealing with this vice.
Thank you. I think now I'll go to seek clarifications on answers that you gave to my fellow commissioners on specific questions. One is the issue of taking unpaid leave from University of Nairobi, going to Strathmore University to create a law school, which ended up being a competitor, or you perhaps knew that it will be a competitor to your employer. What do you think? Don't you think it was unethical? Don't you think it was not good to do that? Because if it was a business, you would have been fired on the spot. If a business A, which competes with business B, realize that you are working, you have taken leave here to work on a system or a product that will eventually come to compete. What do you think? What is your position? And what do you believe in that?
My firm belief is that we need a good legal education in this country. And when I went to Strathmore, I was not motivated by how much money I would be paid. Actually, I had even thought of starting my own law school. I consider myself also a person who thinks out of the box. And when I left Nairobi, actually, I didn't have a job at Strathmore. I took unpaid leave because I needed time out. I had been a chair of department for 6 years. I had also, I had been on sabbatical that had been extremely busy at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. So I thought it's good for me to step back. But I had this idea that the law school I am seeing is not the law school of the future. So it's actually my students from Strathmore who called me and linked me to their vice chancellor and asked, would you consider? And I considered. And I am happy that it turned out the way it did. When I came back to Nairobi, the things that I had learned in starting a law school, for instance, because public university law schools did not require accreditation, we didn't have experience. So I had gotten that experience from Strathmore.
Was your employer happy that you went to establish a law school? Or were they happy when they heard that you are busy establishing a competition? I don't know. I don't know in the educational circles whether competition is as what I'm describing here. Because to me, if it was a business, you would be conflicted. Were they happy? Did they know in advance that you are going to establish a school, or what were the circumstances surrounding you are leaving to Strathmore?
I did not tell them that I was going to establish a school, but you know, my employer was happy because it was whilst I was at Strathmore. You know, the law school at Nairobi had only graduated one PhD from 1950 to the year 2010.
Yes.
And it was whilst at Strathmore that I supervised and I completed the supervision of the two next one, which began a culture of supervision. So my employer at no point saw me as really stabbing the institution in the back.
Thank you. My next clarification is on your answer to Commissioner Warsame on 2/3 gender rule. And I heard the argument, and I only want one straight answer. If you were in Maraga's position, would you have transmitted advisory to the president to dissolve parliament? Yes or no? If you were in his position, in as far as 2/3 gender rule.
You know, that is a conjecture, because I don't know the thoughts that went through the Chief Justice Emeritus. But I think I would have consulted a little bit, because you see, it is also not good to give orders in futility. So, but you know, as a person who believes in equality, I would push for equality. I am not sure that what I'd have given is the advisory, because I haven't thought about it, and I would need to give it a little more thought.
Thank you. My other clarification is the answer to Commissioner Majanja on the issue of ombuds and the constitutional amendment that is going on in the country. And when I looked at your CV, you clearly stated that you were appointed one time in 2006 as a member of eminent persons to look at the constitution process that it's told. So I was wondering why you did not also put this and to say currently serving as an advisor or running a consultancy with Parliament on the issue of Building Bridges Initiative Amendment Bill. So that is a question that I'm wondering, why is it not in your CV? Secondly, as a layman, I'm not a lawyer, I want to understand and you may compare and contrast popular initiative when it comes to constitutional amendment and parliamentary initiative when it comes to the constitutional amendment. I want you to contrast and compare.
Why is it not on my CV? By the time I submitted my CV, I was not engaged.
Okay.
So I have been engaged. Actually, I don't even have a contract. So the short answer is, it was not there. The second question that you ask about popular initiative and parliamentary initiative, I'd refer you to Articles 256 and 257 of the Constitution. The one deals with how one is a popular initiative, which comes from the people, and the other one parliamentary initiative, which comes from Parliament. I would like not to talk a lot more about that, because that is a matter before court.
Okay, finally, my final clarification, and it is whether it's all one statement, is still a clarification on Majanja's question on ombuds. Would you, as CJ coming in, which route will you take? Is it to look at the ombuds the way it operates now and do amendments within the framework of its operating now, or you believe that the other BBI way is the best? Which one will you do if you walk in today as a CJ?
Let me say that, Commissioner, for me, I want an accountability mechanism that works. So if the one in the judiciary is working, and I have no reason to say it is not working, then that is, I would go with it. But you see, we have a process that is ongoing. And should that process find see the light of day, then there are going to be implications. So in essence, it is to look at how within the institution can we ensure accountability.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Commissioner Koskei. Prof, just one clarification from me. You said earlier that in the case of that difficult case where you had problem with students, and you said that when you went to Senate, you said it is either the students are produced or you are not the dean. So looking back, Prof, was that the best way to handle it then, or would you have used maybe a bit of emotional intelligence to get what you want? That means the students disciplined without having to kind of look like you are threatening to quit. Because I'm asking this, Professor, because CJ job is very stressful, the way, from my short experience in the judiciary, and we don't want you to also threaten to quit when things become tough. Thank you.
And I would also say that I was young, and I was probably at a point where I was faced with, it was actually a very difficult issue for the campus. And if the same issue arose now, you mature with age, and maybe now I would make a different decision.
Noted, Prof. Commissioner Orada, you have the final questions, clarifications.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm back again, Professor. In this exercise, as we go about determining who the best candidate would be to nominate for the office of Chief Justice, we also do some background check on the candidates, and we receive information from people of all walks of life and in different capacities. The information we have received concerning you have raised concerns with us because they touch on your quality as a team player and team leader, and they also touch on your integrity. We've received information concerning Professor Migai, who I believe you must know. And the information we received is that he developed a concept note on the subject of searching for balance, reflections on Kenya's presidential elections in 2013,